Before sunrise on April 18, 2016, a storm swept through Midlothian, Texas. Inside a dark church, security cameras caught a figure in full SWAT gear, helmet, vest, hammer in hand, wandering the halls. 30 minutes later, fitness instructor Missy Bevers walked in to set up her class. She never walked out. No robbery, no DNA, just a single question still echoing through that empty church. Who was behind the mask?
The storm had been building over North Texas all evening. Thick black clouds rolled across the sky, the kind that swallow the moon and turn familiar streets into places you no longer recognize. Inside a quiet brick house in Midlothian, 45-year-old Missy Bevers zipped to a training bag, checking for the last time. Weights, resistance bands, microphone headset, towel. Everything was ready for the early morning boot camp class that had become her life's rhythm. The rain began to lash at the windows as she sent one last message to her students. Class is still on. If it rains, we'll meet inside the church. It was a small adjustment, something she had done dozens of times before. No one could have imagined how much that decision would matter. Missy moved through the dim kitchen, the clock blinking past 10. Her husband, Brandon, was away on a fishing trip several hours south, and the silence of the house felt heavier than usual. Their 3 daughters were asleep, the only sound the low hum of the storm pressing against the roof. She checked her phone again, scrolled through Facebook, responded to a friend about tomorrow's workout, then slipped the device onto the counter beside a folded gray hoodie and the pink top she planned to wear. She didn't know that among her recent notifications was a message from LinkedIn, a private note from someone she barely knew. The tone had been odd, too personal, enough that she'd mentioned it to a friend a few days earlier. "Weird," she'd said, "like someone I've never met just popped into my inbox to flirt." She had brushed it off. Texas is full of strangers, she'd thought. Nothing to worry about. By midnight, the rain had turned heavy, steady sheets that blurred the streetlights. Across town, surveillance cameras caught a ghost, a silver Nissan Altima, slipping quietly through the parking lot of a hunting supply store. The car idled for a moment, headlights sweeping the empty asphalt, then circled once, twice, before disappearing into the darkness again. There was no clear reason for it to be there at that hour. No break-in, no alarm, no witness. Just the eerie certainty of movement where there should have been none. Later, detectives would freeze the frames, zoom into the license plate, and realize they couldn't read a single letter. At 3:30 in the morning, Missy's alarm broke the stillness. She arose, dressed in silence, and tiptoed past her daughter's rooms. The house smelled faintly of coffee as she poured a cup to go, scrawled a small note for her husband in case he came home early, and stepped into the humid pre-dawn air. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. She climbed into her white Toyota truck, set her duffel on the passenger seat, and drove off into the half-lit world that belongs only to shift workers and insomniacs. Her windshield wipers kept a steady rhythm, the radio low, a familiar song humming somewhere between static and melody. Around 2 miles away, the Creekside Church of Christ sat at the edge of town, a modest beige building surrounded by open fields and gravel lots. Inside, it was completely dark. But at some point between 3:30 and 4 o'clock, a door was opened, quietly, precisely. Security cameras mounted in the hallways flickered to life, capturing the strange reflection of movement. A figure in full tactical gear, the word police printed across the back of a dark vest. They moved slowly, methodically, swinging a hammer against locked doors, shattering small panes of glass, then moving on. Their gait was peculiar, feet turned outward, an awkward rhythm, as if every step took thought. The flashlight beam crawled across the walls, across the cross hanging near the altar, across empty classrooms. The intruder lingered, not searching for valuables, not hurrying, simply existing inside the church like a shadow that knew it had time. Missy turned onto the access road just after 4. The storm clouds were breaking apart. Streaks of gray light seeped through the horizon. She checked her phone, 4:16 a.m., and texted a student, "I'm here, be careful on the roads." As her truck pulled into the parking lot, the headlights caught on the wet pavement, glinting off the church windows. Inside, the figure continued to move, a dull metallic clink echoing down the hall as if acknowledging her arrival. She parked near the entrance, grabbed her gear, and jogged under the overhang. The automatic doors parted, letting in a quick gust of rain-cooled air before sliding closed again behind her. Somewhere inside, a light flickered, and then the cameras lost her. No one saw what happened in the next few minutes. No one heard a scream, no shattering glass beyond what was already broken, no alarm, only the storm beating steadily against the roof. At 5 o'clock, one of her students arrived early. The parking lot was still empty except for Missy's truck. Inside, the building was darker than usual. "Missy?" she called out, her voice echoing through the hall. No reply. She walked further in, saw a gym bag overturned near the foyer, then something she couldn't process. The shape of a body, still, half lit by the exit sign's red glow. She froze. Another student came in moments later, and her scream shattered the quiet. The 911 call reached dispatch at 5:06 a.m. The operator asked for the address, then the question that still rings through every account of that morning: is she breathing? Paramedics arrived within minutes, their boots squeaking across the slick floor. Rain poured outside as police taped off the entrance. In the cold, fluorescent light of the hallway, Missy Bevers lay surrounded by fragments of glass and scattered fitness equipment, her smartwatch still blinking from recent movement. Around her, there was no sign of theft, just violence, sudden and deliberate, and an overwhelming sense that the church itself had swallowed its own silence.
By sunrise, the storm had passed, leaving behind a sky the color of ash. The parking lot of the Creekside Church of Christ glistened with puddles, each one catching the flashing red and blue lights of emergency vehicles. Officers from the Midlothian Police Department moved cautiously through the wet gravel, their radios crackling, voices low and measured. What they found inside would stay with them for years. The church, normally a place of worship and laughter, now felt hollow. The hallway near the main entrance was sealed off with yellow tape. Plastic gloves and evidence markers covered the floor. Missy Bevers lay at the center of it all, the victim of a brutal assault that had lasted only moments, but carried the fury of something deeply personal. The coroner noted multiple puncture wounds to her head and chest, injuries that could have been caused by a hammer or a similar blunt instrument. Yet, curiously, her wedding ring, wallet, and phone were still there. Nothing was missing. This wasn't a robbery. Investigators began photographing every corner of the church. In the hallway near the kitchen, they noticed shards of glass scattered in neat patterns, the result of deliberate strokes. Nearby doors showed marks of forced entry, but none led to any valuable room. It was as though the intruder had been performing, staging chaos, rather than searching for something specific. And everywhere the officers looked, they found footprints, clear impressions left by tactical boots, the kind worn by law enforcement or military personnel. The crime scene unit collected samples of blood and fibers, swabbed surfaces, and lifted prints, though most of what they found was smudged or partial. The one piece of solid evidence was digital, the church's internal surveillance system. Multiple cameras had captured a shadow moving through the halls for nearly 30 minutes before Missy arrived. When detectives first watched the footage, they thought it was a joke. The figure wore a black helmet, gloves, and a vest labeled police, but it wasn't any uniform used by their department. It looked like something bought from a surplus store or costume shop. The figure's behavior was both methodical and strange. They opened doors one by one, peered inside, and moved with no clear purpose. At times they paused, staring at nothing, adjusting their gear, tapping a hammer against a handle before breaking a small window. There was no sign of panic or rush. Whoever this was, they were completely at ease. And the most haunting detail of all was the walk. A slow, rolling gait with feet turned outward, the kind of movement you'd notice instantly in a crowd. Detective Mike Mears, one of the first on the case, later said that the footage felt like watching a ghost that didn't know it was being seen. Every officer who viewed it agreed on one thing: this wasn't a random break-in. Someone had planned this. Someone who knew Missy's schedule, or at least knew she'd be there before dawn. By mid-morning, Brandon Bevers, Missy's husband, was still away on his fishing trip near Biloxi, Mississippi. He got the call around 9 a.m. He couldn't process the words, injured, church, come home. It took another call to confirm what had happened. As he drove back through the long stretches of highway, reporters were already gathering outside their home, and the small community of Midlothian was beginning to ask questions no one could answer. The police started with those closest to Missy. Friends described her as disciplined but warm, someone who inspired loyalty. Her husband, her students, fellow instructors, all said the same. She had no enemies. Yet some whispered about tension at home, about finances, about the strain of two demanding lives pulling in different directions. The detectives didn't dismiss it. They drew up a list of everyone with access to her schedule, everyone who knew the class time and location. At the same time, the strange LinkedIn message she'd mentioned to a friend a few days before the murder resurfaced. The sender's profile was vague. No real photo, minimal activity, just a few connections. The message was friendly, even flirtatious, and Missy had thought it odd but harmless. Police obtained a warrant to trace the account. The trail led nowhere. A temporary email, a VPN, no recoverable identity. But the timing was chilling. The footage from inside the church was analyzed frame by frame. Experts at the FBI's behavioral unit were brought in to study the suspect's gait and body type. One report suggested the individual could be between 5'2" and 5'8", possibly female based on body structure and stride length. But others disagreed, arguing that the weight of the gear or an injury could distort posture and make the walk appear different. The truth was that the video gave more questions than answers. Detectives also canvassed nearby businesses for additional footage. That's when they found the mysterious silver Nissan Altima, recorded 2 hours before the murder. The car had circled a building several times, stopping at odd angles, headlights flashing. It never appeared on nearby traffic cameras. When police released still images to the public, dozens of tips poured in. People swore they knew that car, that it belonged to a neighbor, a coworker, a friend. None of them checked out. Back at the police station, evidence piled up without pattern. They found no DNA other than Missy's. No fingerprints matched anyone in the system. No witness saw a stranger leaving the church. The killer had come and gone between storms, invisible except for those few haunting minutes on camera. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure from media and community only grew. Reporters crowded press briefings, demanding updates. Police released 30 seconds of the surveillance video, hoping someone might recognize the suspect's walk. It went viral overnight. Online forums exploded with theories. Some claimed it was a jealous rival. Others insisted that it was a former student, a relative, even a woman disguised as an officer. The out-towed gait became an obsession. People filmed themselves walking the same way, comparing frames, debating body proportions. But despite all the noise, no concrete lead emerged. For the investigators, the emotional toll was heavy. They were chasing a phantom, a person who had executed a murder with surgical precision, left no trace, and vanished into the ordinary rhythm of a small Texas town. The church was scrubbed clean and reopened for worship within a month. But for those who'd been inside that morning, nothing about it felt sacred anymore. At night, the lead detective replayed the footage on his office screen. He watched the figure appear again from the darkness, the slow gait, the hammer, the vest. He froze the frame where the flashlight passed over the wall, catching the words "faith" and "fellowship" stenciled above the classroom door. The irony was unbearable. Every detail screamed intent, but none revealed identity. For Missy's family, grief became a long corridor with no exit. Her husband stopped and relatives. Candlelight vigils were held. Posters were printed. The local news cycle shifted to other stories. But in the corners of the internet, the case refused to die. People dissected every rumor, every frame, every whisper. Some were cruel, some desperate, most just searching for a face behind the helmet. And through it all, the footage remained, the most chilling artifact of the case. A figure in SWAT gear walking calmly through a church minutes before a woman was killed, knowing cameras were watching and not caring at all. The stillness of that confidence was worse than any weapon. Whoever they were, they didn't come for money. They came for her.
For weeks after the murder, Midlothian became a town haunted by silence. The sound of that early morning thunderstorm had long faded, but its echo remained in conversations whispered over fences and in grocery store aisles. People wanted to believe the killer was a stranger, an intruder who drifted in and out of their community without roots. But deep down, no one could ignore how deliberate it had all seemed. Someone had known where Missy would be, when she'd arrive, and how long she'd be alone. Investigators worked outward from that truth. They began with Brandon Bevers, Missy's husband. He was still out of state when the murder happened, a fact confirmed by phone records, credit card logs, and witness statements. The alibi was airtight, but the questions around their marriage were not. Friends described a relationship strained by finances and long absences. Brandon traveled often for work, and Missy's social media presence, cheerful, open, full of smiling selfies from fitness events, sometimes sparked jealousy. Detectives found text messages that hinted at tension, at arguments that never fully healed. Still, there was no evidence that linked him to the crime. He cooperated fully, sat for interviews, and even took a polygraph test, which he passed. Attention then turned to someone closer, Missy's father-in-law, Randy Bevers. Weeks after the murder, he arrived at a dry cleaner in Corpus Christi, wearing what employees described as bloody-looking clothes. He explained it immediately. The stains were from a dog accident during a hunting trip, nothing more. The story checked out, and lab tests confirmed that the material on his shirt was animal blood, not human. But by the time police cleared him, rumor had already done its damage. Online sleuths dissected his posture, his height, even compared his gait to the suspects. The family was shattered twice, once by the loss, and again by the suspicion that came with it. Detectives also examined Missy's digital life. She was active on social media, running several accounts to promote her boot camp classes. Through them, police discovered a few exchanges with men she'd met through fitness events. Casual, friendly, sometimes flirtatious, but never conclusive of anything deeper. Still, they couldn't ignore the tone of certain messages, particularly those arriving in the days before her death. One message from a man she knew vaguely from the fitness community read, "Can't wait to see you again." Another, anonymous and unsettling, arrived on LinkedIn. Short, oddly worded, the kind that makes your stomach twist without knowing why. Every man she had ever texted or trained with was interviewed, questioned, and eventually ruled out. But if the killer wasn't family and wasn't a lover, then who was left? The theories began to multiply. Some believed it was a woman. The gait, that rolling outward turn of the feet, seemed shorter, softer, less rigid than a man's. The way the suspect moved their arms, the shape of the body under the gear, several experts argued it was unmistakably feminine. Police considered this seriously, looking into women within the fitness scene who had clashed with Missy in the past. There was gossip about a business rivalry, about jealousy, about someone who resented her growing popularity. Yet no evidence tied any of those whispers to violence. Another theory pointed toward law enforcement itself. The word police printed on the vest, the confidence with which the suspect moved. Some thought it could have been a disgruntled officer or someone with access to tactical gear. Yet every local and county officer in the area was accounted for that morning. Uniforms were checked, logs verified, vehicles tracked. The department even reached out to military bases nearby, just to be sure. Nothing. Others wondered whether the intruder was there not for Missy, but for something inside the church. Perhaps they had broken in to steal equipment or money, and Missy had simply walked in at the wrong time. But the longer detectives studied the footage, the less sense that made. The suspect hadn't looked for cash boxes or electronics. They hadn't tried to reach the offices or sanctuary. They had wandered the hallways as if waiting for something or someone. Then came the theory that chilled even the most seasoned officers, that the murder had been a planned execution disguised as a random crime. The uniform, the hammer, the broken glass, all part of an elaborate effort to make it look like vandalism. The suspect's calmness suggested they knew the layout, possibly had keys, or at least had studied the church beforehand. One investigator noted that the killer moved directly through staff-only areas, avoiding alarms as if aware of their placement. This wasn't an act of rage, it was choreography. Detectives began to map out the morning on a whiteboard. From the moment the Nissan Altima appeared on camera at 2 a.m. to Missy's arrival at 4:16 a.m., there was a 2-hour gap, enough time for the suspect to drive from the store to the church, break in, and wait. But wait for what? The timing seemed perfect, almost too perfect, as if they had been watching from a distance, counting on the storm to hide their presence. As the investigation deepened, police issued a statement asking the public to come forward with any information about individuals who suddenly displayed injuries, changed routines, or appeared nervous after April 18th. The phones lit up. Tips came in from across the country. Someone claimed the gait resembled a former student of Missy's. Another said it matched a woman from a neighboring town who'd once trained with her. There were tips about ex-cops, about jealous spouses, about people no one had ever heard of. Every lead led to another dead end. FBI analysts reconstructed the suspect's possible movements after leaving the church. The rain had erased footprints outside, and no external cameras caught a car leaving. The road was quiet, the storm washing away every trace, as if the killer had vanished into the downpour. Months later, investigators released additional footage, longer, clearer, showing the suspect opening doors and pacing deliberately. Public interest spiked again. Internet forums lit up with frame-by-frame analysis, comparing gait angles, measuring limb ratios, debating whether the figure's movements were genuine or intentionally disguised. One theory even suggested the suspect was limping on purpose to mislead gait experts. Another claimed the attacker wore padding or fake bulk under the uniform to distort shape. Meanwhile, Missy's family tried to hold on to what dignity remained. Brandon faced relentless speculation. So did Randy. Friends who'd known Missy for years found themselves accused by strangers online. The grief turned bitter. The trust in the community eroded. Everyone looked like a suspect in someone else's theory. Through it all, one detail refused to fade: the hammer. Investigators never recovered it, never confirmed whether it was left behind or taken. It was both weapon and symbol, the silent punctuation mark at the end of a life lived in discipline and kindness. By the first anniversary of Missy's death, the case had gone cold. The church returned to its quiet routine, sermons echoing through the same hallways where she had taken her last steps. But the footage remained, locked inside the evidence room, an endless loop of a shadow moving under flickering light. Each time, they found only the same unsettling truth. Whoever had killed Missy Bevers knew exactly what they were doing and exactly how to disappear.
By the second spring after Missy's death, Midlothian had begun to move in that uneasy way towns do when tragedy fades from the news cycle, but never truly leaves the air. New families joined the church, new sermons filled the same sanctuary, and yet everyone who'd lived through that April morning still felt it, the quiet tremor that rippled each time rain touched the roof. The investigation was technically still open, but it had settled into a kind of suspended animation. Detectives rotated to new assignments, the task force office was packed into labeled boxes, and the enormous timeline board that once covered a wall was folded away in evidence storage. The video, the 30 haunting minutes of the figure in tactical gear, was now a piece of legend, replayed endlessly by YouTubers and armchair detectives, slowed down, color-graded, outlined in red. Each viewer swore they saw something different: a limp, a braid of hair under the helmet, a reflection in the visor. Each theory added another layer of fog. For Missy's family, the loss never dulled into routine grief. Brandon Bevers gave fewer interviews, but when he did, he spoke with the flat exhaustion of a man caught between anger and disbelief. He kept the house much the same, her running shoes still near the door, her workout playlists on the stereo. Their daughters grew taller, their mother's absence stretching like a shadow through birthdays and graduations. On the anniversaries, friends gathered at the church parking lot, releasing balloons into the morning sky. The sound of rubber and ribbon brushing against air felt strangely sacred, the only noise that dared to fill that silence. Reporters would still call sometimes, chasing new angles. Once, a journalist asked a detective if he thought the case would ever be solved. The detective paused for a long time before answering. He said, "Maybe, but whoever did this understood us. They understood how time erases small things. They counted on that." He looked down at the stills from the surveillance footage, frames now worn from being handled too often. They built their hiding place out of patience. What haunted investigators most was the question of intent. Was it personal hatred or a form of control? The killer had risked everything to confront Missy inside a church, under cameras, with a storm outside that could have delayed her. That level of certainty implied obsession. Some believed the murderer wanted not just to kill her, but to be remembered through her, to bind their identity to her final moments. That idea was unbearable, and yet every new detail the public discussed kept that phantom alive.
As years passed, the digital echoes multiplied. Reddit threads, Facebook groups, TikTok clips, each dissecting the same 30 seconds of footage. Some users claimed to have cracked the case, pointing to neighbors, co-workers, even relatives. Others built entire timelines of coincidences. And through it all, the official investigation remained silent. Every time the police released a brief statement, no new information at this time, it reignited the cycle. The mystery had outgrown the crime. It had become a story people needed to tell themselves about fear, familiarity, and the unknowable. For those who knew Missy, that transformation was painful. She wasn't a symbol, she was a person, warm, determined, sometimes stubborn, always hopeful. Her friends remembered the way she'd text them at 4 a.m. before class, writing, "Let's crush it today." They remembered the way she encouraged people who were struggling, the small kindnesses that never made headlines. To them, the viral speculation felt like another kind of theft, the stealing of her humanity. Yet even within the noise, something useful lingered. The case became a quiet lesson in vulnerability, a reminder of how public our lives had become. Missy's openness, the way she shared her schedule online, was the same thing that made her community feel close to her, and, perhaps, what allowed a stranger to find her. In the years after, fitness groups across Texas changed their safety routines. Classes that once met in isolated parks began requiring check-ins, locked doors, and better lighting. The tragedy had reshaped the culture of trust around small-town life. One summer evening, nearly 7 years after the murder, a storm once again rolled over Midlothian. Inside the church, the new congregation finished their service, unaware of the exact spot where Missy's final class had been set up. Outside, lightning split the horizon. Rain began to fall in thick silver sheets, the same as that morning long ago. And for a moment, the entire building seemed to hold its breath, as if time itself remembered. The police case file still sits open, technically active, inside a climate-controlled evidence room. It holds hundreds of pages, interviews, forensics, DNA tests, transcripts of every 911 call. And in the center, a single USB drive containing the footage that started it all. Each detective who transfers into the department is asked to watch it once, not for leads anymore, but as a reminder of patience, of humility, and the quiet spaces between certainty and doubt. What remains unsolved is more than a name. It's a portrait of control, fear, and the limits of understanding. Someone out there, walking through their own ordinary life, carries the memory of that morning. They remember the rain, the hammer's weight, the sound of glass giving way under pressure. They remember the moment Missy turned the handle and stepped into the hall. Maybe they think of it less now. Maybe it visits them in dreams, but it's there, the secret no storm has managed to wash away. And so the case of Missy Bevers endures, half tragedy, half enigma, suspended between faith and darkness. A church that once echoed with the rhythm of morning workouts has become a symbol of unanswered prayers. The cameras that once watched her killer still hang quietly in those hallways, red lights blinking, waiting, just in case the ghost ever decides to come back.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Okay, we're jumping straight into a really tough one today. It's one of those cases that just sticks with you. The 2016 killing of fitness instructor Terry Missy Bevers.
Right, inside a church in Midlothian, Texas. And what makes it so globally fascinating, really, is this paradox.
What do you mean?
Well, unlike a lot of cold cases where you're starved for evidence, this one has incredibly clear surveillance footage of the suspect right before the murder.
Ah, yeah. The video. It's infamous, simultaneously the best clue, and maybe the biggest red herring.
Exactly. It's both the investigation's most powerful tool and somehow its greatest obstacle.
So our mission today is to really unpack the sources, piece this thing together. We need to look hard at the key evidence, the bizarre disguise, for starters.
Highly specialized gear, and the suspect's movements. Very strange.
Almost robotic. And then there are all the theories that have come and gone,
Yeah.
The leads that just fizzled out. We want to understand why this case is still so cold after all these years.
Yeah, looking at the implications of each piece of data, because it feels like a meticulously planned crime that kind of collided with an unexpected event.
Let's set the scene first. The victim, Terry Lee Woolman Missy Bevers, née Strickland. Born in 1970, so 45 years old.
A mother of 3, married to Brandon Bevers since '98, and she was pretty well known locally as a Camp Gladiator fitness instructor.
Right, popular. And that morning, April 18th, 2016, the weather played a huge role, didn't it?
Absolutely. There was a massive thunderstorm rolling through. Because of that, Missy told her class they couldn't meet in the parking lot like usual.
So she moved the 5 a.m. class inside the Creekside Church of Christ.
And that decision, just a practical one because of the rain, basically sealed her location for the killer.
We know from some unreleased footage, she got to the church around 4:18 a.m. to set up.
And then tragically, one of her students found her body just after 5 a.m. when they arrived for the class.
Wow. So that whole window, the time frame for the actual crime, is incredibly tight.
Yeah.
Less than an hour.
Very narrow. Police arrived. She was pronounced dead pretty quickly. The cause of death was multiple puncture wounds. Head and chest.
Okay, puncture wounds. That immediately sounds, well, not like a random struggle during a robbery.
No, exactly. It points towards specific tools. And the police warrants later said the wounds were, quote, consistent with tools the suspect was carrying throughout the building.
And they found a hammer near her body, along with other tools.
Yes. Suggesting the killer came prepared, brought their own implements for the attack.
Which brings us right to that surveillance video. The core of the whole mystery, really. Because the outside cameras weren't working that day.
Reportedly not, but the internal cameras caught something truly chilling.
Okay, describe the suspect from that video.
They show up around 4 a.m., so maybe 18 minutes before Missy even gets there. And they're dressed, head to toe in what looks like police tactical gear. SWAT style.
Like professional gear.
Oh, yeah. Helmet, gloves, boots, and a vest that actually has police markings on it. This wasn't some cheap costume. This was serious, expensive equipment.
And what were they doing in the video? Just waiting.
That's the other bizarre part. They weren't acting like a typical burglar trying to be quick or quiet. They were just walking around the church hallways. Kind of slowly.
Meandering almost.
Yeah, meandering is a good word. Smashing some glass occasionally, trying doors. Just odd behavior. And then Missy arrives, starts bringing her gear in from her truck.
And presumably walks right into this person inside the church.
That seems to be the scenario. The level of preparation for the disguise alone is significant. But let's talk about the walk, the gait.
Right. That became a huge point of debate.
Huge. Investigators noted it immediately. It's a very distinct walk. Slow, unsteady at times, sometimes using the wall for balance.
And specifically something about the right foot or leg. Like dragging it.
Yeah, appearing to have trouble with the right foot or leg, that distinct movement.
And this led straight into the whole gender debate, didn't it?
Absolutely. Initially, everyone just assumed male, probably because of the bulky gear, the police association.
Makes sense as a first assumption.
But then investigators started saying, well, the gait itself seems kind of feminine. That caused a massive public shift, everyone suddenly looking for a woman.
But they can never confirm it either way.
No. And this uncertainty, this ambiguity, it really hampered the early investigation. Was it an injury? Was the gear just too heavy and awkward? Was it deliberate?
So many questions just from the way they walked.
Exactly. It got so confusing that in 2021, the FBI brought in a specialist, a forensic podiatrist named Dr. Michael Nierenberg.
Okay, so what did the foot expert say? Did he settle the gender question based on the walk?
He basically neutralized the entire debate. Dr. Nierenberg concluded you cannot determine the suspect's gender just from that gait.
Why not?
Simple reason, really, but crucial. The gear itself, that heavy tactical vest, the helmet, carrying tools, it fundamentally changes how anyone walks.
So what they were seeing wasn't a natural walk at all.
Precisely. It was the movement of someone weighed down, encumbered by all that equipment, maybe trying to be quiet, maybe just awkward in it. It masked any natural gait indicators.
Wow. So the killer's meticulous disguise, the very thing meant to hide their identity, also accidentally wiped out a key biological clue like gait.
That's right. The video shows us what happened, the preparation, but it gives us almost nothing reliable about who did it physically.
Okay, so if physical appearance is a dead end, we have to look at motive. The initial idea was burglary because of the broken glass and rattling doors.
Yeah, that was floated first, but police dismissed it almost immediately.
Why so quickly? I mean, seems like a plausible cover story, right? Killer breaks in, gets surprised.
But the scene didn't match. Nothing. Absolutely nothing was missing from the church. And crucially, Missy's purse, her iPad, they were left right there, untouched.
Okay, yeah. That doesn't sound like a robbery, especially not a panicked one.
Exactly. So sources say police quickly shifted. They came to believe Missy was specifically targeted.
And the broken glass was just staging, an attempt to make it look like a burglary gone wrong.
That seems to have been the theory. A clumsy attempt at staging, maybe?
It does seem clumsy, though. If you're organized enough to get that gear and plan the entry, why leave the valuables? It kind of blows the cover story instantly.
It does raise questions. Maybe the plan got sloppy in the final moments. Maybe the focus was entirely on the attack. The staging was an afterthought. Hard to say. But the targeted theory led them to look at her digital life.
Right. Warrants suggested the killer might have used a smartphone, maybe to track her schedule, especially since the class location changed last minute.
Capitalizing on that change. And this ties into those messages she received.
The LinkedIn messages. Warrants mentioned she'd gotten, quote, creepy and strange messages from some unknown guy before it happened.
Yeah. And law enforcement did track down someone connected to those messages.
What did he say?
He admitted to the conversation, but apparently insisted it was just flirtatious and innocuous.
Interesting that the investigation seems to have taken his word for the tone being innocuous, especially when the initial description was creepy and strange.
Yeah. It does feel like maybe an avenue that could have been explored more, but perhaps they hit a dead end there too. It definitely shows they were considering a stalker angle, someone who maybe misinterpreted their interactions with her.
Okay. And like in so many cases, the focus eventually turned to the family.
Inevitably.
Yeah.
But her husband, Brandon, and her father-in-law, Randy Bevers, both seem to have solid alibis pretty early on.
Brandon was where?
Fishing.
Fishing in Mississippi. And Randy was traveling out in California. Confirmed alibis.
But there was that whole thing with the father-in-law, Randy, and a shirt. Right?
Yeah.
The bloody shirt scare.
Oh, yeah. That caused a total media storm when the search warrants became public. It turned out that 4 days after the murder, Randy took a shirt to a local dry cleaner.
And it looked like it had blood on it.
Appeared to be bloodstained, yes. On its face.
Yeah.
Incredibly suspicious timing.
Absolutely. So what happened? Forensics must have jumped all over that.
They did. Randy had an explanation. He said his 2 dogs had gotten into a fight, and the blood was from that. Midlothian PD sent the shirt for analysis.
And the result? The results came back confirming it was canine blood. Dog blood, not human.
Wow. Okay, so a huge, dramatic red herring. Explained, investigated, and cleared.
Exactly. Cleared that specific suspicion around the family, though obviously the scrutiny continues in unsolved cases.
Okay, let's shift to the last big piece of physical evidence. It's not at the church, but nearby, right? The mystery vehicle.
Yes, the vehicle of interest. In May 2016, about a month after the murder, police put out an appeal. They were looking for the owner of a specific car,
Okay.
a Nissan Altima sedan, 2.5S model from between 2010 and 2012, possibly had an oval bumper sticker.
And where was this car seen? Not at the church itself.
No, that's key. It was spotted in the parking lot of a nearby store called SWFA Outdoors, and importantly, it was seen around 2 a.m.
2 a.m., so a good couple of hours before the suspect was inside the church.
Right, about 2 hours before the figure appeared on the church's internal cameras.
And what was the car doing? Just parked.
No, and this is where it gets really weird. Police eventually released the full surveillance footage from the store lot. The driver was acting, well, bizarrely.
How so?
The car drove around the parking lot, circling multiple times, then it randomly flashed its headlights on and off.
Flashing headlights. What could that be for? Signaling. Testing sightline.
Could be anything. Signaling someone, checking if the coast was clear, testing visibility, who knows. Then it pulled into a kind of secluded part of the lot, just sat there for a few minutes, and then drove off.
That is deeply suspicious behavior, especially given the timing relative to the murder. What could that mean? A dry run, waiting for something.
It strongly suggests some kind of preparation or reconnaissance, or maybe establishing a meeting point or escape route reference. The store is maybe 10, 15 miles from the church, so there's distance, but the timing, 2 a.m. for the car, 4 a.m. for the suspect.
The temporal link is hard to ignore. Someone was doing something very cagey in the area shortly before the crime.
Definitely. But despite having the make, model, year range, possible sticker, and this really specific weird behavior on video,
The driver has never been identified.
never identified, and police haven't definitively said, yes, this car is connected, it's just another major piece of evidence hanging out there unresolved.
So when you put it all together, what are we left with?
It's just, the complexity is staggering, isn't it? You have this crime that got massive attention, seems clearly planned. You have video of the perpetrator right there.
Detailed video and specific tools, the gait analysis, the digital trail, the weird car.
All these pieces, yet the absolute fundamentals, who was this person, male or female? Why Missy specifically? What was the real connection? Still completely unanswered after all this time.
It really speaks to how effective that disguise and maybe their planning was.
Yeah.
Just totally obscuring the basics.
It does. And we know tips still come in constantly.
Yeah.
The reward money has gone up significantly over the years. I think it hit $150,000 back in 2021.
And there are ongoing efforts, like that podcast, True Crime Broads, just trying to keep the case alive, hoping for that one tip.
Trying to generate the one piece of information that finally breaks through that tactical gear, essentially. Because the amount of information is huge, but the core identity, still a complete mystery, a cipher.
Which leads us to that final thought we wanted to leave with you, the listener, thinking about that disguise again.
Yeah, that very specific tactical gear.
Obviously, it hid their identity, but why the police marking on the vest? Was that just practical, maybe buying a few seconds of hesitation if someone saw them, giving them an air of authority?
Or was there something deeper? Did that uniform, that specific word police, mean something more psychological to the killer?
Like a symbol of power or control? Maybe something personal that resonated with them in the context of this planned violent act.
Something to really mull over as we wrap up this deep dive into the Missy Bevers case. It's a question that gets tangled up in the motive and the killer's mindset, which remains so elusive.
We hope breaking down the sources like this give you a clearer picture of the knowns, the unknowns, and just the sheer frustration surrounding this investigation. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.